Hi, welcome back to another episode of Peaceful Passages with myself, Theresa Bates, and Sierra Onstead.
Hello again.
Yes. Today I want to focus a little bit more on community involvement. Why is that so important?
It's very important because, well, we all live in a community, and whether that's friends, family, or coworkers, or our larger community, whether that's our churches or other spiritual congregations and that sort of thing, like figuring out how do we support each other, how do we love on each other in these difficult times.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the terminologies that I learned a long time ago is the terminology of what is a death cafe. And that a death cafe is something that you can embrace and teach about a lot of different aspects of death and dying. And I know you have a little bit more experience in what those are about, so I'd like you to share that with us.
Thank you, Theresa. I've been to several, and I've even hosted a couple more informal death cafes. Mm-hmm. What's really cool about them is they were kind of a reflection of like the philosophical cafes back, like, you know, during the Enlightenment period, mm-hmm. where you would have all of these different kinds of people come together in a room, and it would be more of like a party, but like also like you would have people talk and discuss the issues of the day. But with death cafes, it's honed in and specified with issues that are surrounding death. So whether that's you're looking at it and you're identifying problems in different spheres, talking about it, discussing it, and then figuring out what those solutions are, and then going out into the community and figuring out how to remedy these different issues, whether that's through the medical or political spheres, or in like your community. How can you educate people better? What are ways that we can change legislation around some of this, these different things? What's really amazing is they kind of started around 2011, and ever since then, there have been over 6,000 death cafes worldwide. So, you know, we think, oh, people don't talk about death. We're talking about death. Yeah. Like, it's amazing.
Right. Well, we're at a point where we're no longer wanting to avoid the topics of death.
Yeah.
And to fear death itself.
Correct.
And one of the things that I really like when I first hearing the concepts of death cafes is, again, we're creating a safe space to be able to talk, a place that is, there's no judgment, no criticisms that are allowed, a place where people can share different ideas to get help, but also I remember how blessed I was when you came in my sphere at a conference this last year, and where we have the opportunity to be able to talk. And because there's so much that you know, and there's a lot that I know that we can share back and forth.
And learn from each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And this, in turn, helps us to bless you guys with what we have.
Exactly.
So a death cafe, basically, from what I understand, is you have somebody that leads it, facilitates it, but allows the people to kind of bring up whatever topic is needed. Because sometimes somebody is walking through the beginnings of a death, or sometimes themselves or a loved one on what to expect, or other times there are other people there to help other people. So it's a wealth of information.
Exactly, and it's community based.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of the more specific support, we'll get that into in another program. But one of the things that I did want to focus a little bit more on is with what we're teaching on a community basis.
Yes.
So,
what does that look like in the community? What are the different like stages and steps when it comes to like a death happening in the community? How can people come and support the family, and like show me like what does that process look like?
Okay. Well, when it's nice, like I said in one of the other episodes, to have everything in writing, so that way if and when a death occurs, because most death, well, I can't even say that, rewind. Death sometimes is very unexpected. When a death occurs, it's nice to know who to call and what people do what. So in a community aspect, if you want to start your own Hever Kadisha, and that's basically what we do is Hever Kadisha, which means Holy Society. And I learned a lot of these protocols through the very many blessings of my Jewish brothers and sisters. And they're different rituals and things that they have in place. So one of the first things that we can do is and I always get tongue-tied. My mentors kind of chuckle at me. I'm starting to learn Hebrew. It's called Bakur Kolim, and that means more of visiting the sick. So instead of running away from somebody, you want to kind of go there, embrace. Sometimes somebody just wants a story read to them, or
Keeping them company,
right,
making sure that they're seen, heard,
right,
and
keeping them company, but also giving the caregiver a break
True,
to be able to go do something else. And those things are important. Write letters. Sometimes the people at that practice Bakur Kolim are there to maybe write a letter, or they want to talk about something that they're not comfortable talking about, in front of their family member or something. There's a lot of blessing to be able to walk through that particular realm. But when a death occurs, most of the time the main contact person would be either your rabbi, your pastoral leader, or somebody like myself that's in charge of the whole program. And with what I want to share, you don't have to do every single thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah, these are just options and
These
different protocols that can be used.
Right, because each community is different. Each community, you're going to have communities that want to run everything very strict and by the book and check off all the boxes, which is very much a blessing.
Yeah,
you have
there's a
other
lot of
communities
organization.
that want a little bit more fluidity, and you will find your niche on which one that you want to do. And they're all blessed, they're all good, they're all needed. So when a death occurs, you would call the person in charge, and they have a set of people that they would call. So the first person they would call would be the Shmirah leader. And the Shmirah leader, what that is we were talking about it in one of the other episodes, it's the guarding. And this is one of the most blessed parts of what a community can do, because anybody and everybody can partake in Shmirah. Basically, it's taking a 2-hour shift and praying or reading Psalms. Sometimes it's done at a funeral home, sometimes it's at the home. I know now with COVID, there's times where people can do it at home or online with Zoom calls and things like that.
That's a great way to do it,
Yeah, it's been a really great way to do it. And they take a 2-hour shift and do nothing but pray and intercede or read Psalms for the family. And that starts at the point of death until the time that they're buried or cremated.
Wow.
Depending on time frames. Most of the time it's within 24 to 36 hours. There's other times it can get a little bit longer. But your community will choose what to do. And you can have the youth do that. Sometimes the busy person likes to have the time to be able to stop and pray for a couple hours. But the mourners around the person that is deceased, what is nice is they know they're having prayer coverage done for them. So it brings them a sense of peace.
That's wonderful.
With that, yeah.
Wonderful. So then after that, what's the next step?
Well, the next step is we call it one of the highlights. One of the specific things that a Hever Kadisha does, and that's called Tahara. Tahara is the actual physical cleaning of the deceased, where we would go in, we would clean the deceased. We do what's called the actual Tahara, which is a water pouring ritual. And that represents a mikveh or baptism for terminology. So it's a water pouring ceremony where we pour water, and sometimes we sing songs. I like to sing Kadosh. I like to sing Amazing Grace. And your community will choose whichever songs. Sometimes we have something set up, sometimes we don't. And there's a lot of blessing, because you feel the Father blessing that particular body. And after that, we dress them, anoint them. We have earth from Israel that we can put on them, so that way they actually touch the soil. And the earth from Israel is from the Mount of Olives. Amazing. That we can spread inside the casket. So that way the deceased is touching the soil from Israel, so they're part of the land, and that way. And then we close the casket.
Okay.
So we do that part. There's times that we can do it in the funeral home. We can do it at the home. There's a little bit different protocols in both ways, but it's a very blessed time to be able to do that. It really bonds the community together.
Definitely.
Because when we come together to do the Tahara, what is so nice is we're being a blessing to somebody that can't clean themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we're a baby can't do that.
Exactly, yeah.
But when we get older in different times in our life, when we go to school, when we graduate, when we get married, anniversaries, weddings, things
all
like
these
that.
keystone points in our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
We want to be washed. We want to be clean. We want to be purified. And so when we do that, that's what the Tahara represents, where there's a group of people that come in and do that for the loved one in our community. And one of the nice things about that is the women take care of the women. The men take care of the men. Men never take care of the women.
Modesty issues, yeah.
Right, a lot of modesty issues. But if there's not enough men, women can take care of the men. But it's never reversed because there's modesty, respect, dignity. So
Honoring
we try
each
to
other,
hold,
yeah.
right. We try to hold to that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So after a Tahara, how can a community come around the grieving family and support them? Because, grief, it's a long-term thing. It's not just, you go back to work, it's all done and, forget about it. Like, I'm sure there's a way to support them through, the week, the year, the month, whatever it may be, that process of going forward. How do you support them?
Right. Well, one of the ways that we, as a community, can support, touching a little bit back on the Tahara, is afterwards in Numbers 19, it says whenever anybody touches a dead body on the 3rd and 7th day, you're supposed to have a special cleansing.
Gotcha.
A lot of people think this is just for the rabbis, and there's some people that think that it's for everybody. And whatever way that you choose, there's more people that choose not to do a red heifer because now there is
we don't currently
no red
have
heifer.
that, yeah.
But it's interesting when you follow through with the protocol of doing a special washing on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. The Father is teaching us what to do. So when the red heifer sacrifice, when that comes in, and our Jewish brothers and sisters or the Levitical priesthood puts that into play, we will have an understanding of what is being done there and to know how to pray.
Yeah.
And another thing that the Tahara team does is they can do, you obviously are going to shower extra on the 3rd and 7th day, shower or bathe privately. But what some groups do is they will do a community mikveh.
I like
And
that.
as the Tahara team. And what happens in the Tahara room stays in the Tahara room.
It's a very sacred space.
Right.
Private.
And very sacred and holy space. But after that, going directly to your question, is there's a 7 days of Shiva. And Shiva means 7 in Hebrew.
Okay.
But where the community can come around the mourner. The specific mourners are generally those that either lived very close proximity in the home with somebody, or who they are is the parent, the child, maybe the child lived with a grandparent,
Immediate
somebody,
relatives,
right, the
yeah.
very close immediate. And that's where the Shiva house would be. And when you come into the Shiva house, there's so much information here. I'm not going to be able to get it in one program or two
Try to
or
summarize
three.
here. Yeah.
So I'll try to keep everything short. But the whole emphasis, and it's one of the most beautiful, and I would love to see people embrace whether they do a Hever Kadisha or not, is because so often when a death occurs, we respectfully want the mourners to try to get back in life as much as possible and to get back.
You want them to heal.
Right, you want them to heal and keep moving forward and develop a new life. That's much easier said than done. And when I learned the Jewish rituals on what they do, is they try to block out that 7-day period of time. Some can only do it for 2 or 3, but if you have that 7-day period of time, you take the 7 days, you actually allow yourself to grieve.
let yourself feel those emotions, because unfortunately
Right.
in our society it's very much, dull those emotions, or you suppress them and you don't
Right.
get to work through them.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more about grief in another episode, but people fear grief because grief is everything. It's anger, it's sadness, it's disappointment, it's guilt, it's remorse. There's so much packed in there. But at a Shiva house, you let the mourner set the tone. If they want to talk, you let them talk. If they don't want to talk, you sit quietly, because the mourner, they know who's there. And I know one of the bigger things that people worry about is, well, I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to avoid them for this period of time,
Yeah.
which is a human reaction.
It is.
But the challenge is when one person does that, it's not quite as noticeable.
But when
But
everybody
when 2, 3, 4, 5, and the mourner stays home alone,
they feel isolated and alone
Right.
and unseen. Yeah.
right? And we'll go into a
More
lot
in-depth,
of detail
yes.
later on another program, because we'll talk about the issues of guilt and things like that later. But allowing that 7-day period of time allows the mourner to be able to process. So say that you particularly lost a loved one. God forbid, I don't want that to happen. But I would come in your home, and I would quietly, either I would approach, because I'm going to know, the community is going to know the mourner.
Oh yeah. There's
And
a
they're gonna
relationship already
know-
established. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that you don't want to say is, how are you?
Yeah.
Because that puts them on the spot. It's very awkward. And sometimes you might get a response back saying, okay, I'm fine.
Which that's not.
And putting yourself in their shoes is, if you just lost your loved one, how would you feel?
If someone asked you that.
And putting myself in their place, because I think on how devastating it would be if I were to lose a parent, or God forbid, lose one of my children. That's where I tend to go before I ask a question, because I can come up and acknowledge them there. You're going to know if the person is a hugger or not. You're going to
Respect
see
their physical boundaries. Yeah.
right. You're going to see on their demeanor on whether they're able to be approached or not. And if you're feeling that they're not, quietly sit down on the couch and pray. You don't have to say anything. Your presence there speaks so loudly to them.
Truth.
Because you're there. Myself, I tend to get fidgety if I sit a little bit too long. And in a Shiva house, a lot of people tend to bring a lot of food, and that's one of the things that the community can do,
can be a
is
blessing,
do a
yeah.
meal program.
So then they don't have to think or put their energy towards that if
Right.
they don't
So
want
that
to.
right. So that way, that mourner can. That's the only thing they have to do is mourn the loss. Sometimes they shower. Sometimes they don't. It depends on what each group and individual family wants. But if I come into a Shiva house and I'm sitting there quietly, and the mourners are busy talking, and I look around and I just happen to glimpse in the kitchen and see that the dishes are dirty, I'm going to respectfully and quietly
Go take
go
care
take
of
care
it.
of the dishes.
So it's not a burden for them or an
Right.
inconvenience. So we're
Right. Or
And
if
you're
you
showing
see-
them love.
Right. If you see the bathroom is dirty, or you see the trash needs taken out, just out of respect, do that instead of making a point to go to the mourner to say, "Hey, I'm here." Almost get in the face. I'm here to help. I'm here to help. I will finish that that word out completely. But you want to be a blessing.
See a need and fill it.
Right. And so you're gonna feel that. And there are times where the mourner, you can tell, is struggling and is having a hard time. That particular mourner, what you want to do is you have an idea a little bit ahead of time on seeing, knowing that that's going to happen in advance. And to have a system around of people that the mourner knows,
Yeah.
that and talk to the mourner. We understand it's going to be hard. For a few days, can we have people here with you 24/7 just to make sure that they're safe?
Yeah.
And you don't have to follow them everywhere.
No.
You don't have to follow them in the bedroom and
No.
bathroom, because sometimes people have different ideas. But basically,
give
you
them
just
their
want to make
privacy.
sure that they're safe. But if there's a situation that happens that you emotionally can't handle, or there's a situation that happens where you feel the atmosphere is unsafe, don't be afraid to call for backup.
Yeah.
And you would call either another one of their loved ones, or call your rabbi. If it's you call your rabbi, call those on a Shiva list that you know that's there, or the trusted best friend, and you don't leave them alone. If you feel like they're
Volatile
struggling,
or whatever it may be.
right, just more struggling. If the emotion is a little bit more anger, which sometimes happens, depends on the type of death, then you're going to want to have a little bit more men there, or people closer on standby. Sometimes it would be awkward if you have a situation going on, then you pull up your cell phone. It's like, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to call somebody. That can be awkward.
Yeah.
If you can step away and do that around the corner. But there's all kinds of things, with that. And I got a little long talking about that. That was a little passion there. But allowing for that block of time, what happens is it helps the mourner to be able to process. So if the mourner were to say, "Oh my gosh, I miss so and so," tell me about him. What do you
Hear their
miss?
stories.
What do you remember? And try to draw that out, because that will help them process the grief a little bit more. And after that period of Shiva is done,
What's the longer term?
right?
Yeah.
Well, one of the beautiful things to do is, sometimes you can do this, sometimes you can't. It depends on the particular house and community. But one of the things they like to do is, you have your best friend or a group of people that you would walk out together. You would, after the 7 days, you would walk out of the Shiva house, and you would walk around the corner. You walk around the block, because what you're doing is you're walking out the protocol of leaving the house of mourning and going back
Into
and
the
starting to embrace the community, and to do that. And I know in some of the Jewish circles, they have a minyan, a Shiva minyan, where the community would come together and would pray with the mourners, and would say the mourners Kaddish. And they would do that every day, except on Sabbath, I believe. But your particular congregation has their prayers that they want to do. But a lot of it is just to come in for the community to embrace. And if you're a community that likes to prepare for food, set it up, but only find out the foods that the mourners like.
Yeah, and
Not
if
what
they
you
have any
want,
dietary
what they
restrictions
like.
or whatever it may be.
Put dates on it, but also give food like every other day, and just kind of have something, that they can nibble on, because a lot of mourners don't tend to eat.
Well, yeah, they're not hungry at the moment because, it's very emotional.
Right. So let the mourner set the protocol for that. But one of the beautiful things is 30 days later, instead of, in our culture, we tend to get everything done as quickly as possible. We'll have the funeral, have the memorial, do the graveside, do the headstone, and just live your life.
Yeah.
The Jewish Jewish brothers and sisters has set up stepstones. So after the Shiva period, they have what's called shloshim. And if you speak Hebrew, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to learn. And it's the 30 days after, is you purposely make an appointment with yourself and maybe one or two people, your closer friends, and you revisit the emotion of grieving the loss of your loved one. So it's not open-ended.
Yeah.
And it's okay to remember the loss. You've lived so many years with that loved one. And it doesn't matter if it was a day, 2 days, 6 months, a year, 50, 60, 70 years. You still have that
Time with them.
that time. and you want to revisit that around the 30-day mark. And then after that, you have the anniversary, which is 1 year later. And with the Jewish rituals, what they do is they have the unveiling ceremony. And the unveiling ceremony is they wait for the year later to put on the headstone and make that a ceremony. So there's blocks of time, so it's not open-ended.
Yeah.
Instead of just getting everything done, packed in, and okay, you're free on your own.
Exactly.
They have times to be able to come together.
Which is wonderful, because
Right.
then the mourner isn't forgotten, because like, you know, we kind of like, not really forget, but we ignore it, or we don't know how to talk to them or interact with them, or we
Right.
don't think about, oh, well, this is their first feast without them, or this is their birthday
Right.
of the person that they lost. Like, all those emotions come back, and it's very difficult for the mourner. And so when
Right.
you have people who are aware and recognize it, then they can come and support that person in that time of need.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics with that when we talk about grief. But one of the beautiful things that communities can do is they can keep a calendar and keep track of when somebody has died and make a note. And we have the beauty of cell phones nowadays to put the anniversary and have a notification a week ahead, send them that card.
Yep.
Because it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't think anybody remembered.
Exactly, and it can be as simple as a text
Right.
or a phone call.
Right.
Cards are a wonderful
Right.
idea.
Cards,
Yeah.
texts, or phone calls are nice. I know some of the bigger Jewish communities, when I was going to school, they'd have memorial walls and would have candles, different colored candles, to announce the number of years that
Since the
they've
passing.
lost them. They make plaques to put on walls, or just have a way that the community together can honor the loss of their loved one, to do that. And there's some very creative ways
There certainly
that
are.
community is. And once you open that door to have that conversation on what we can do as a community to come together, instead of running away when a
Exactly.
death happens, embrace and say, what can we do to make the situation better? What can we do to bring peace? And to find the little intricate ways to remember the life of the loved one that was there, because every life is valuable. Every life has purpose. Every life has meaning and impacts us, whether it's short or very long. And finding ways to embrace that is just so beautiful.
Truly.
So we want to thank you all for joining us together at this program for Peaceful Passages with Sarah and myself, Theresa. And we want to thank GLC again for opening this opportunity. And we'll see you again next week. Shalom.